Good morning. Thank you guys for joining us today. We'll get started in a few seconds. We'll let everybody log in. We'll get started. We're 9 o'clock on the dot. I appreciate people being on time. My name is Amanda Cahey. I'm the communications specialist at the New York State LTAP Center Cornell Local Roads Program. Today we have Marty Robert presenting on Highway Department duties and responsibilities. A few things to go over. All the polls will be done within Zoom. So a poll will pop up. You can answer, and then we'll share all the information. The chat is disabled, but if you do need to get in contact with me or have a question for Marty, you can put that in the Q&A and I will get that information over to him. And with that, I will turn it over to Marty.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to Highway Work 2025. I hope everybody had a good holiday. This is the first webinar of many that will be presented throughout this month and next month and maybe even into March. If you're on here today, I'm assuming it's because you want to get better at what you do or you're new to the position, and I'm going to do my best to try to help you avoid some of the pitfalls that may go along with your position. We are doing the poll EV. This is what you'll find at the bottom of the page of your screen. What's your primary job? What's your function? Are you a highway worker? Are you a highway superintendent or a supervisor, an engineer, other? Let me know. I kind of like to know who I'm speaking with today, who I'm teaching to, my dancing partner.
So I had a few different options in the my job is I had administration, highway superintendent, engineer, field crew, board member, and none of the above. I had a little more elaborate answers. But looks like we have a good mix. Some administration, mostly highway superintendents and DPW commissioners, handful of engineers, and some field crew.
Well, it's good to know that you guys want to get better at what you do. And who do you work for? Village, town, county, city, state, the private sector, or maybe just the weekend?
Looks like we have a good mix again. We have 8 people from the town, 9 from the county, 7 from the city or village, and 3 from the state, and 1 person for the weekend.
I like honest people. Well, and we have one more poll. How long have you worked with the highways? A month, a year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 11 to 20, and 20 plus.
Looks like we have a good range. We have 1 less than a month, 3 less than a year, 3 for 1 to 2 years, 3 for 3 to 5 years, 6 for 5 to 10 years, 5 for 11 to 20 years, and the most 8 for 20 plus years.
Wow, I'm glad to see that people that have some tenure are still willing to pay attention to what might help make them better at what they do. So my name is Marty Roberts, as Amanda said. I spent 38 years and 11 months with the town of Reading, 15 years as highway superintendent. I retired in 2015. I spent 11 years on the New York State Association of Town Superintendents of Highways Executive Committee, and I was president in 2014. I've been with the local roads program since 2016. I teach running your highway department, reducing liability for highway departments, and rights and responsibilities. It's been a great run with the LTAP program. I felt like after I retired, I needed to give back, and this is how I do it. So your department responsibilities, there's a multitude of things that a highway department is responsible for. Some of them are obvious, such as road and street construction and maintenance. Some departments may have other duties as well. You might have water and sewer, cemeteries, parks, vegetation management with herbicides, traffic controls. Some departments even are responsible for navigational aids along New York State's Atlantic coast. I did see that there were quite a lot of village and city people, along with some state people. This webinar is sort of geared towards towns, but most of the principles are the same throughout. You know, timing is some, especially with villages. We talk about things to do at the beginning of the year. Your year starts in June, as opposed to towns and the counties starting January 1. And the states, I would assume, starts April 1 after the state budget supposedly is passed. So I would think that what we do here today will be of value to all of you. So your duties and responsibilities. Records, number one, and we see it in bold there because records are your primary responsibility, not only from a legal standpoint, but you're required by law to make sure you keep good and factual records. You're responsible for the highway, you know, the right-of-way, everything within the right-of-way is your responsibility. You're responsible for notice. When I talk about notice, I'm talking about actual notice, construct notice, those sort of things. You're responsible for payroll and vouchers. Even though you have a payroll clerk, somebody has to make sure that those things are done, and you have to sign it as a town superintendent. You have to sign off on all of those payrolls. Restricting and closing roads, you need to know your responsibility and what you are legally responsible to do, what you can do and what you can't do. And your responsibility for liability and risk. And a couple of the classes that I teach delve into this at great length. And I would encourage you to take one of these classes when it becomes available through the local roads program. The one thing that you really want to pay attention to is minimizing your risk. It'll never go away, but you can help minimize it. And you're responsible for annual reports. Day one, keep good records. I can't stress this enough. If you've been there for 20 years and you keep good records, attaboys are in order. If you're not, start the new year off on a new foot. It'll pay dividends in more ways than you can know. It helps from a legal standpoint. It's a budgeting tool. It's an aid in planning. At a bare minimum, keep daily records should include weather, road conditions, employee attendance, vehicle crashes within your jurisdiction. A full rundown on record retention periods for individual records can be found at the New York State Archives Retention and Disposition Guide. Remember, records are permanent. Everything you write down is foilable. Keep that in mind. What to keep, where to keep them, and how long you keep them. All of those things are extremely valuable, and especially if you ever get into litigation. Month one, January. If you're new to the superintendent's office, and I'm talking mostly about towns and county people, the first 90 days, the hours logged for the New York State retirement system have to be recorded, you know, because they want to make sure that you're actually doing what you're getting paid for. And if after the first year, you just have to reconfirm those hours, and those have to be given to the clerk. You want to appoint or reappoint your deputy superintendent. You want to do that at the very first meeting of the year to make sure that you have a backup in place. And if you're a town guy and you don't appoint a deputy highway superintendent, the board can legally appoint one for you. And you might better have who you want as opposed to who they want. Make sure your 284 agreement is completed before any money is spent. I always put it in the first meeting of the year. And keep in mind, a 284 agreement is not a forever thing. You can change it as the season goes on. I used to always modify mine as soon as the spring thaw was over with, and you could see that maybe there was damage in places that you didn't expect, and you can change those as you need to. My CHIPS projects were always, I started 4 or 5 years before, so I knew exactly where I was going to be spending those monies, and those can be put in there. You can get estimates for those kind of things from vendors, or you can do the work yourself. But make sure that those things are put in as quickly as you can, so that if you need to haul stone in the winter or get pipe for projects, those things can all be you can voucher those through because you have your 284 agreement in place. Right away, manage all aspects of the right of way. Those things are drainage, bridges and culverts, ditches, storm sewers. I see there's a lot of village guys. Storm sewers are important. Road service, potholes, traffic markings, signage. Signage, keep in mind, the number one litigated thing in tort liability cases is signage. Make sure you keep really good records on your signs. Make sure if it's possible, you really should GPS mark whenever those signs are in place. Make sure you have your crews keep an eye out for defective or missing signs. Those are the kind of things that really could end up biting you. Make sure you keep good sign records. I can't stress it enough. Your signs should be inspected spring and fall, for retroreflectivity and those sort of things. Hazards, trees, fixed objects, utilities, snow and ice. Make sure that you keep it, especially with trees. Emerald ash borer has caused tremendous number of trees to die. A lot of them have been taken out of the system, but as I travel across the state, I can tell you there are an awful lot left, and a lot of them are potential hazards. Keep an eye on those, because if you're driving by those on a daily or weekly basis and you don't do anything about a tree that doesn't have any leaves on it all summer long, it's pretty much constructive notice, and I'll talk about that next. So when I talk about notice, I talk about prior written notice of a defect. If you're a town guy, village guy, county doesn't get they don't get all of the advantages of having a prior written notice. And in fact, village guy gets them all. You get all of the prior written notice without adding any the local law for complete protection. Actual is if somebody actually wrote a written letter, sent it to you or to the clerk, or an email would be considered actual written notice. Constructive notice, as I talked about with the emerald ash borer and the ash trees, if a tree's been dead for long enough and you've driven by it, it really and truly is constructive notice. If there's a big pothole, just as you enter your highway department and you've driven by it for months, and somebody hits that and breaks a tie rod end or bends a rim or blows a tire, it's constructive notice. You should have noticed it was there. Make sure that if you see something, you do something about it. Law enforcement is the other one. It's actual given written notice. If a person of law enforcement says there's an issue, as soon as they tell you that, all of that is logged. It's actually written notice of a defect. Make sure that you act on those things quickly. Make sure that you log all of those things, and all of those written notices have to be given to the clerk, and they have to file those in a specific place so that they can it can be. And make sure that you also file with that what you did to correct that action, or do what action you took to correct that defect. Payrolls and vouchers. You're responsible for employee time off and time off records. You're responsible for vouchers. When you sign a voucher, it says I've received the goods or services. Make sure that you're not paying for things before you actually get them or before the services are provided. Bids. You're responsible for bids. You may do your own bidding. If you do, make sure you follow all the requirements for doing that. You're responsible to get written quotes, oral quotes. Make sure you know what your procurement policy is and what the thresholds are at what point you have to get those quotes, to get those to go to bid. The state has some rules about what the numbers are. Make sure you understand what the thresholds are, and know your procurement policy. How much can you spend without getting approval? And you should check that. You should check to make sure that that's enforced every year. And if you need to, you bring it up with the legislative body and find out what your procurement policy is going to be. Restricting and closing roads. Counties, towns, you may think you have the authority to, if you're a superintendent, you may think you have the authority to close a road. You only have authority to close a road temporarily for construction purposes. If it's a long-term closure, it has to be done by the supervisor for a town. It has to be done by the chairman of the legislature for the county, and it has to be done by the mayor for a village. Keep that in mind. Don't be thinking that you can just close a road. If you have a weather event that causes serious damage, you can close it temporarily if you can fix it quickly. If you can't fix it quickly, then you certainly need to have the supervisor, or the board of legislature, or the mayor close the road. Make sure you give proper notification of the closure. Make sure you have your detours in place. These have to be, make sure you notify emergency management. You may have to notify schools if it's during the school year. And you're going to have to notify the residents on the road. It's especially if it's a long-term closure, make sure that you have the proper signage in place according to the MUTCD, so that you can minimize your liability. Remember, I said signage is the number one litigated thing in tort liability. Liability and risk. Managing liability may include your equipment. Make sure you keep good records of work done on equipment. Make sure you know every time somebody adjusts brakes, whatever it might be, make sure that that stuff is all logged. You got to make sure that you're going to minimize the liability through your employees. Make sure that they're respectful of the people that they work for. Obviously, you're going to want to manage the liability within the right of way. And when I talk about your employees, make sure that first of all, as a supervisor, make sure you are cognizant, you pay attention to how you act and react to people that you deal with, the public. And make sure your employees know that too. It's not possible to limit all liability. You're only going to be able to minimize your exposure by keeping a sharp eye out for defects on highways, your equipment maintenance, and your interaction with the public. It's only possible if the department employees are trained to be diligent in watching for these risks as well. Train your employees to act respectful and to work safely. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, everybody now has a camera in their pocket. They'll record you. You may not know you're even being recorded. So please make sure that your people are aware of how they act. So your annual requirements and reports. You're responsible for state contracts. You buy fuel on the contract. You buy salt. Local contracts. The salt contracts will come out in the spring. Your fuel contracts, whether it's heating fuel, if it's road fuels, and if you have local contracts with local vendors as well. Your road mileage report for chips, it's a requirement. Your bridge and large diameter culvert inspections twice a year, spring and fall. Make sure that you're doing those and make sure they're all documented. Sign inspections. Semi-annually, spring and fall. Make sure that's all documented. Machinery inventory for the towns, you have to provide that to your clerk and possibly to the county superintendent, depending on the county's requirements. Make sure that's done. Your SH 900s, that's your sickness and health reports. PESH will require that. And I, in touring this past fall, teaching this last fall, PESH is back out doing inspections again. So make sure your SH 900 is up to date and posted, conspicuously posted somewhere in your department. And if you're a village, cities, MS4 reports, make sure that they're handed in as they should be. Personnel policies. If your employees are involved in a labor union, they may be covered under a binding agreement. So be sure your personnel policy does not come in conflict with it. Do you have a cell phone use policy in your personnel policy? Smoking in vehicles. If you go to Cornell's local roads website, there are examples of personnel policies that you can use as a template. Remember, these need to be reviewed and updated at least annually. Make sure your people are aware of what's required of them and what you're required to give them. Make sure that, I mean, they could have been there for a long time and they'll know, but especially new hires, make sure that they understand. I always presented a copy of our personnel policy as a part of their packet, their new employee packet. Make sure that they understand those. Make sure that they're up to date and timely. And when I talk about cell phones, make sure they understand about what they do, maybe what they do on social media. Make sure that they understand that what they do on the job and what they post on the job could have a real effect on the liability for the municipality. Make sure that they understand that. And maybe make sure that you understand it as well. It could be a good thing. Social media can be a good thing to let people know what's going on within the town, but posting the wrong thing could have a real adverse effect. Equipment management. You're responsible for purchase, maintenance, and disposal. And when I talk about maintenance, make sure that you take care of it. Make sure, my grandfather always said, grease is cheaper than parts. Make sure that things are maintained well. Equipment's not getting cheaper. I can tell you right now, the cost of doing business now is just, I never would have thought it 10 years ago what equipment would cost. You know, $150,000 truck now is $250,000. It's going to get to the point, or it's at least getting to the point that some departments is going to price them out of being able to do business. I don't know how you generate enough revenue to do that without without making people leave. I guess there'll always be somebody to take their place, but make sure you take care of what you have so that you can increase the, the viable length of its life. Make sure you understand how you dispose of equipment. Has to go through a disposal process. Premature failure. And why do things? First of all, it could be because you're using the wrong equipment. Maybe it's overworked. Maybe it's lacking the maintenance, or maybe it's poor operation. Make sure you train your people well so that they're good at what they do. They're not abusing the equipment. They're operating it safely so as to minimize the liability for that. And it could be the age. Iron only lasts so long. There's an effect on it. I mean, it may look like it's good, but at some point things just age out. And then there's accidents. I probably should change that to crashes because there really are no accidents. Make sure your people adjust the brakes and do all the things that keep vehicles safe. You certainly don't want to end up in a tort liability case, have to go through the whole deposition and end up in court. I can tell you, if anybody's done it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't done it, you don't want to do it. Trust me. And make sure you understand the department's insurance coverage. I would assume that everybody has personal protective liability. I say I would assume, but you shouldn't assume. Make sure that you have officers' liability insurance. If you're new, or maybe if you're not new, make sure that you talk to your supervisor or your chief executive officer for the county, and make sure that you understand that you have liability protection through the town, through the insurance. You certainly don't want to lose everything you have because of an incident involving your work. Yeah, I believe this photo was taken as a result of an incident on interstate in Kansas when a 70-mile-an-hour collision with a with a bridge highway overpass. It's not good. But I will tell you, they had that thing chained down. Budgets. So if you're a town guy, your accounts are going to be A is general, DA and DB is town highway, DB is if there's a village within the town, D and DM, D is the county roads, and DM is county machinery, and H is the cap for capital projects. A5110 is administration, A5120 is engineering, A5132 buildings and garage, A3310 is signs. Remember, and when it says A, it means it's a supervisor's fund. DA and DB is general repairs. DA and DB is capital. We talk about DB, that those are villages as well, those are village within the town as well. DA is bridges, DA is 5130 is equipment, DA 5140 is brush and trees, 5142 is snow and ice, and 5148 is other governments. The object codes, point 1 is personal, point 2 is equipment and capital expenses, point 4 is contractual, materials and invoice, point 6 is debt and principal, point 7 debt interest, and point 8 is employee benefits. Which ledger account do you think this is? Well, if you said A3310 is signs, you'd be right. Which ledger account would you think this would be? Well, if you said 5110, it's repairs, that's true, But when you look at the size of the culvert, it could very well be bridges. Just make sure that you're consistent. If you're considering these things bridges, make sure you're consistent about the size of them. Which ledger account do you think that might be? Looks to me like a nice single surface ceiling coat. It's probably a 5110 repair. But since chips allow that, it could be a 5120, it could be a capital. Which ledger account do you think this would be? Mowing the town hall. A 5132 buildings and grounds should be correct. Make sure that if your highway personnel are mowing town halls, working in cemeteries, make sure that you're billing that to the appropriate fund. Don't be using those highway guys to mow the town hall and putting it under highway, because there's an appropriate fund for that. Make sure you're charging it as such. If they're working cemeteries, make sure that you're charging it to cemeteries and not to the highway. I know it's a pain, but I tell you, if you're audited, they're going to want to know. Budget estimates. There's a lot of ways to do this. There's zero-based budgeting. I can tell you right now, unless you're a real numbers guru, if you're going to start every line item in your budget at zero and build it back, you're going to be a while doing it. The Tim Hunts of this world could probably do that, and he also teaches a budgeting work class or budgeting workshop. I'm not that guy. I wasn't that guy. I actually used historical averaging, what we've done over the past, and add an amount to that. I used consumer price index. I will tell you that the last few years, especially with the inflation as it has been, this is a much tougher job than it used to be. I don't envy you guys. It's pretty tough to get a handle on what you should add to those individual line items. Fuel jumping to $5 a gallon from $2. It was a huge curve that you guys had to deal with. I don't envy you at all. When developing my budget presentation, life cycle planning for equipment and highway maintenance helps with long-term budgeting. I would hope that you would have at least a 5-year capital plan, and you probably should have a 10-year capital plan. It makes more sense to have a long-term plan. That way you can plan and you can budget for those things. Cost of living increase, life cycle planning. Your budget cycle, T-minus 3 months, you present your department budget to the supervisor. Villages are a little different. I would assume that village guys are starting it right now, getting your thing together, getting your budget together to present to the mayor as your cycle ends in April, May. Make sure that you present that. You have a legal responsibility if you're a town guy and a village superintendent as well, a DPW head. You have a responsibility to present that budget. T-minus 2 months, you're going to have your tentative budget in place. You're going to have a public hearing at 1.5 months. We always did ours the first board meeting of November, right? Usually right after the election cycle, and we would adopt that final budget, with a month before the start of the new calendar year, or the new year for village guys, your new calendar year. And then the start of the fiscal year, your new budget starts. You guys are all working with a fresh new budget. Unless you're a village guy, you're kind of on the down end of how much money you have left. But you really should truly start your budget development as soon as your new budget is put into place. Scheduling work, you determine the work needed. You plan activities, you calculate the costs, and then you implement it. So when you schedule work, make sure you plan, you mobilize, you build, you clean up, and you evaluate. And probably, I would say cleanup is one of the more important things. Make sure that if you do an excavation, that you clean things up when you're done. Make sure you seed things down to minimize erosion, but it just looks, you really should leave your project like you'd never been there. And when you get done, evaluate what you did and what you could have done better. And sometimes maybe it's good to have your personnel, and not maybe it's good to have the people that actually have their boots on the ground. If you're not a part of that, ask them what they thought they could have done better, and pay attention to them, listen to them, because they're the ones that are actually out there doing the work. And try to come to some sort of agreement as to how you might change things the next time. And all these things make sure that when you do this stuff, you have safety in mind with all of it. Make sure you keep your guys safe. The typical process is inventory, condition, repairs, prioritization, and implementation. You always have to prioritize. I would encourage you not to do the worst first. Keep your good roads good, especially when we're talking about highways and right-of-ways. Keep your good roads good, and keep the vast majority of the money spent on the good roads. And it may sound counterintuitive, but if you do the worst first and you let the good roads go bad, it's a catch-up game that is pretty hard to ever catch up to. I know this for a fact. You should have inventory of all your roads. You're actually doing that for your town guy. Well, actually, anyone that files a chip, their chips format has an inventory of the roads. You know, should know your bridges and culverts. Ours were all GPS located. All of it's on a map, a big map. We knew what culverts were there, what they were made of. If we knew the installation date when they were installed. If you have bridges, you may own your own bridges. The county may be responsible for your bridges. Some villages have towns that are responsible for bridges. Make sure you know what signs you have. How many signs do you have? I don't know if there's anybody out there that could raise their hand and tell me how many signs they have. I could tell you. I couldn't raise my hand and tell you, but I could tell you because all I'd have to do is look, and I knew how many signs we had. What the signs are, when they were installed, and what the condition is. Guide rail. Do you know how many feet of guide rail you have? How about equipment? If you're a town guy, you have to provide that information to the town clerk, as I said, or maybe the county superintendent. And what about miscellaneous items, about tools and all the things in your department? Make sure you know what you have. Some of the things are easy, such as roads and machinery, but the balance these items should be recorded for budgeting purpose, and in case you have a catastrophic loss. What if you were to have one of the, and as I hate to say this, but one of the annual losses due to fires? Make sure that you know what you have, and make sure that stuff is all stored, all those records are stored off site as well, so that in case there was a catastrophic loss, you'd know what to present to your insurance company. And once again, make sure you know what your insurance coverage is. Condition. What's the condition of your roads? Keep a file and record on every road under your care and maintenance. This should include highways that are your department maintains for other departments as well. I use the coffee cup method. As many of you may know what this is, if you have to dump the coffee cup out as you're traveling the road, that's probably not one of the better roads you have. Make sure you know what the condition is, and make sure you document that, right? Mostly for some of it's for budgeting, some of it is for work to be done, planning. Make sure I have the file on every road we had in the town already. Purchasing. Understand your procurement policies. How much can you spend on direct purchases? You go down to the Car Quest and buy wiper blades. You go to Napa and you buy oil filters. How much can you spend in direct purchases without getting approval? How much before you have to have oral quotes? And I say oral quotes, I don't even know if this is necessary anymore. I mean, almost everything you can get a written quote for. I mean, I would say almost everybody has access to the internet. You can get a quote on Amazon or a number of places on your phone. But make sure that you document where you got those written quotes from. You know, you could print them off, or you can just maintain, you can document where you got those numbers from. You know, and I would encourage you to get 3 quotes on almost everything that you buy. You know, bids, you know, we understand the bidding threshold provided by the state. The town may have thresholds that they enacted are more stringent. Make sure you understand what your procurement policy is. Exceptions, there are exceptions. If you're using an engineer, you don't have to have an exception, or you don't have to have a bid for it. If there's a declared state of emergency, you wouldn't have to necessarily get a bid for something. I would encourage you, you can still get a bid on almost anything or a quote on almost anything. We went through some severe flooding just before I retired, and I had quotes on riprap and material the same day. You know, I messaged and emailed contractors and vendors that we had used in the past, and I had multiple quotes and that same day that were faxed to my office. So even though you may have an exception in a severe weather situation, I wouldn't necessarily use that exception. I would probably still try to do the best I could for the municipality. So if you're writing your own bids, make sure if you have a good specification. Make sure it's easy to understand the information, and make sure that when you provide that information to the bidder, they understand that what you're asking for, and make sure that the municipality gets what they want for it, what they want at a reasonable price. Snow and ice control. This is kind of one of my big things when I teach running your highway department, and actually I touch on it with all of the classes that I teach. I don't know how many of you have a written snow and ice control policy. I would encourage you to have one. If you don't have one, if you're doing the same thing every time you have a winter event, and if you're doing it the same way, you really should write it down. You really don't need a judge or a jury deciding what your snow and ice control policy is. Well, you really should have your roads bare all the time. Well, that's not our policy. Well, where is it written down? You really should have a policy. If you're going out at the same time, if there's an event overnight, you should write it down and have it clear cut. There are a number of snow and ice policies that are available at the Cornell Local Roads program. You can access those online. Here's an idea. We stole ours. We borrowed ours. We adapted ours from the town of Orangetown's winter safetygram. You could Google town of Orangetown And you can look on their winter safetygram, and we use that as a basis for our winter maintenance policy. Jim Dean was gracious enough to post it, and ours is posted at the town of Reading as well. There's the differences. They're a much bigger town than we were, but the principle of it is the same. We tell people what we do, when we do it, and you make sure that you have a disclaimer in there in the event of a severe situation, equipment failure, um, employee sickness, but make sure when you don't do it as your policy states, you document why you didn't do it the way you normally do it. You leave it out so that you could, in the event of something going wrong, you're not required to do it. Public interactions. Your department is looked on much differently than it was 20 years ago. I will attest to that. There was a time when most departments were kind of cherished and looked on as an essential part of what we do and how we go about our lives. I'm not saying that you're not as appreciated, but it certainly is. You are. People don't extend the hand and say thanks for what you do. It doesn't mean that you're not appreciated, but as taxes go up and those sort of things, people expect more from you. Be mindful of your interactions with the public and make sure you train your employees, as I said before. Almost everything is recorded in some form or fashion, and there's no need to add liability to the municipality by letting your emotions get the best of you. Standard operating procedures. Everything that you do within your department, you should have a standard operating procedure. Make sure your employees follow those operating procedures. I'm not quite sure if I would be that guy that's hanging off that crane doing that. Pretty sure it's not in this country, but I couldn't attest to that. Sometimes you see people doing silly and strange and foolish things. Everybody should be aware of what they're doing and how they're doing it, and make sure that they're doing it as safely as they can. This photo is over at Cornell University. There's a vendor that was installing, I don't know if it's water line or sewer line, maybe sewer, it seems fairly big. You can see all the things that are wrong. No one has vests on. The only guy with a hard hat is the guy that's in the trench, and he's in there without any kind of shoring or a trench box. Don't do these kind of things. Look at the trip hazards in such close proximity to the ditch. If that bank caved in right there, there's no way they dig him out before he would expire. I'm telling you right now, be mindful. Make sure you guys are wearing their protective equipment. You know, their hearing protection, their hard hats, their vests. It's a dangerous place we're dealing out there. It's not. People don't pay attention anymore. You know, they're on their phones. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And these knuckleheads here that apparently are some sort of employees, I don't know what the vests are going to do. And I can tell you a hard hat's not going to stop that big rock, but that one that weighs 1.5 pounds that rolls down that hill and hits them in the head, they're not going home to their family. Make sure you pay attention to your surroundings. And the two guys that have got their back to the rock slide, I don't know. It troubles me seeing that kind of thing. Emergencies. Emergencies are what they are. I don't envy you guys. I went through a number of them myself. It's not, flooding events, major disasters are tough. I left before COVID came. I can't even imagine what it was like for people that said they've been there for 20 years, having dealt with all of that. It was tough enough on the average person. Those are the kind of things that make you question how long you want to do what you do. I can tell you that the flooding events within the town of Reading just before I retired probably had some effect on my decision to retire. I'm not saying it was all that I had planned for it, but it certainly didn't hurt, you know, uh, to solidify my thoughts on it. I can tell you right now, I appreciate what you guys do. I appreciate, the fact that you are out there still making the roads safe for the traveling public. It's make sure you understand your roles in an emergency. I would assume everyone has an emergency response plan. Know what your role is in that. If you're an administrator or if you're a superintendent, make sure you know what your responsibility is. And that emergency action plan should be looked at and updated annually. Make sure that you understand um, what you're going to do in the event of something like that. Nobody likes to think about it, but trust me, when it happens, you need to know. When it happened at ours, I was on my phone with the supervisor and I said, "Hey, look, supervisor, we've got 7 roads that are impassable right now and are going to need to be closed." He says, "Do what you need to do." He declared the state of emergency in the town and notified the sheriff's department that those roads were going to be closed. And, we notified emergency management, school districts, and all that, just so that they would know what they had to deal with. Make sure you know your role. If everybody works together and acts together in it, it'll make it'll make the whole process more bearable. It won't be easy, trust me. We spent the entire summer trying to recover from what happened, and if it hadn't been for the help of a lot of friends, it wouldn't have gone as smoothly as it did. Make sure that you have a 5G agreement with the partners in your county. Make sure that because when those things happen, and if there's an emergency to the point there's a declared state of emergency at the state or the federal level, if you don't have a 5G agreement in place and an intermunicipal 5G agreement in place, the people that help you won't be able to get any reimbursement. So make sure you have those things in place. You can notify the Cornell Local Roads Program or you can reach out to them and they can help you do that. They could you could reach out to me through the program and I can do what I can to help you get that in place. I would encourage you, if you haven't taken running your highway department, to take that, to take legal liabilities, to take any one of the workshops that are offered by Cornell Local Roads. It'll make you better at what you do. What you do isn't easy, and sometimes it seems thankless, but we can help you make you better. I mean, there are a number of instructors that are experts in their field, and they will make you better at what you do. I'm gonna encourage you to do it. It's a day away from the department. Sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a day away from the department. And I almost always have people say that I'm really glad that I took this. A lot of the newer ones, even if you've taken them in the past, they're constantly updated to what's current and what's new. Um, the legal liabilities and was just rewritten. The Department of Responsibilities, all of those things are constantly revamped to make them more user friendly, to make them more class friendly. I encourage you to take them. It's the kind of thing that smart people are better. They really are. And I will always say, train your employees well. Um, Somebody says, well, if you train them well, they'll go somewhere else. Well, yeah, what if you don't train them and they stick around? Keep smart, keep your people, make them as smart as you can. Teach them, train them. So we have upcoming webinars. The 14th of January, there's going to be road and street legal issues. The 28th is drainage law. The 4th of February is highway or worker safety. I encourage that. The 11th is highway liability. 18th is culverts. The 25th is work zone. And into March, we have pavement maintenance. It'll be getting close to that time. I appreciate you guys taking the time this hour to spend with me, and I hope that you've gotten something from this. If you have questions on any of it, reach out to the local roads program. They'd be more than happy to and that's what their job is. That's what our job is, to make you better at what you do. I would encourage you to reach out to them if you have a question about anything I've talked about today. And if they need me to get involved in it, I'd be more than happy to help you. That's what my job is. I take a great amount of and pride in what I do, and I hope that I can make you better at what you do. And I hope that today was something that you learned about. Yeah, I hope you learned something today. I want to thank you all for taking the time, and good luck on your 2025 season. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you guys for attending. We'll see you all next Thursday. Oh no, Tuesday. And with that, enjoy, stay safe, have a great day.